And we're back. So here we are again, the Naija Nerds. We've been talking to the guys from the Comic Republic. Great conversation. Make sure you look them up on thecomicrepublic.com and get your full fill of free comic books. We'll get into how their business model allows them to give you such high quality stuff for free. Having said that, I have questions and I want to throw this in your direction. One of the first things that struck me in reading some of the books I was reading was that not only is it important for you guys to properly represent African history, but I'm noticing that there's a strong emphasis laid on African language in the work that you do. Specifically, it's not really important, but it seems like it's a clear artistic choice to depict the cultures through their language. And in addition to that, this is something cool. I've noticed like the characters will use invocations, incantations, seemingly to release power, and I can't help it. The first thing I thought about was, this seems to be that, like the call your attack trope in manga and anime, where a person goes, superpower this, and then releases their power, releases what they have to do. But there's a beauty to what I noticed, because these guys are doing something similar, and it's a lot more poetic, and just by nature of the way this is done, speaking the language and the things that are said, and it doesn't come across like, for example, I think it was in a J I was reading, and you see the character literally, it's almost like she's being nice about speaking her power, like, please do this, enjoy by me this, do this, do stuff like that, and I'm laughing to myself thinking this is one of the nicest, gentlest versions of yelling out your power to kill somebody or to take somebody out or demonstrate your power I've ever seen. So what led up to that? What was the thought process behind not just using the language, but using the language in these specific ways?
Okay, so first let me start with something really interesting that you should note. So for example, Shango in our comic books actually doesn't speak English because he thinks English is beneath him, right? So if you look throughout the book, he's speaking Yoruba because he just thinks English is a dirty language that he cannot be bothered with, right?
Can't disagree.
So one of the things, of course, is we keep saying Africa's best foot forward, right? Who says that the African language is, quote and unquote, the language for the non-smart people? Because the truth is, if you don't have a British accent or an American accent in the world or a French accent in the world, you're either not smart, classy, or sexy, right? Then, of course, if you have an African tone or you speak an African language, you come from a third world country. And our question is, who created these rules? Why is it this way, right? Unfortunately for us, we've been able to create a table where we are creating our own universe, and we say, okay, it's time for us to project the beauty in our language. And it goes a lot into, you don't need to cast a spell sounding like, a lunatic at the side of the road. You can do it, with finesse. You can kindly curse somebody, kindly ask them to just freeze where they stand, right? And then, of course, why do I need to speak English when I'm a god? What do you have to offer me? Things like that have influenced the way we write, where we're bringing out the beauty in our culture, and then, we have war chants. We have one of our characters, Sion, whenever he wants to attack, he goes, Mba. I mean, what is more intimidating than that? An Igbo man telling you, just one word, you're finished, and things like that. So it's all in our focus to, push Africa's best foot forward, let the world see that there's a lot of beauty in the things that are just naturally us, and that we don't have to follow the norm that says an Ajay is a witch, because the truth is, Ajahs in our own history, we actually herbalists, people who heal people, but because they had this fear of the strength of women, which is really where witches came from, when they came to our land, they projected that to our own very powerful women who were going about healing people. And I think I'll just allow Wale pick it up because we're really passionate about this.
You're saying that this came in the element of sexism at play here. That's, you know,
no. While I need to
sexism and
jump in here.
misogyny.
There is. Think about it. I was watching a show on Netflix, and the big title is Wizards, and I was like, even in English, you know, wizards have a more positive connotation than witches. You know,
True.
did that ever occur to you? It just occurred to me when I saw that show. It was just emblazoned across the thing, wizards. I'm like,
it's in the UK is a big issue about the way witches have been depicted. There's what we now call in the UK the white witches group, who are kind of fighting against this sort of connotation. But in England, the history of witches has always been, if you're dabbling in those areas, you're bad, and you're gonna be. You've all seen the story about the dunking and the drownings, and it's always at the behest of the men. And yes, throughout all these dark periods, there was never really a male version of this, of them drowning warlocks. So there was an element of, right, any woman that shows any ability that we can't control, which was mostly around healing people, you know, they were got rid of. So it's a
Why
common
book on this? Because when we're doing our research on Naija, they actually you just do your thing, just talk. He's very passionate about it.
Yeah, that's probably not going to get in a whole soapbox about that at the moment, especially due to the fact that yes, a lot of the sort of historically negative connotations of witchcraft are rooted in sexism, and I am of course mindful of the fact that I'm a man myself, so it's an area where I basically have to tread with quite a bit of caution, but that's not the whole story of sort of the connection between our storytelling and the language that you have identified, Jay. Yeah, it's actually a very good observation, because yes, this is another thing that we did intentionally, and that you will definitely notice as a thread going through a lot of our comics. Language is very important. We have characters go between English and their language quite a bit, and we don't always come at it from the standpoint of oh, English is a terrible language and we're pushing it down. Of course, Shango being this ancient being and who comes from an earlier race of powerful beings that probably were the progenitors of whatever root the modern language of Yoruba came from, would consider his language superior. But then, of course, if you went to the British Isles, there would be a different set of deities there. And I don't know, maybe they would think Celtic was amazing, you know, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, we have a character in Eje, Orishabumi, who speaks the Queen's English. If you read the book, you realize that there's a part where a character is surprised that she speaks perfect English, having never set foot outside the shores of a native land. How that's the case, you will find out soon if you stay tuned. And we focus on these things intentionally, and that's because, yes, we do think that language is a very powerful thing. I don't know if any of you, while growing up in Nigeria, used to watch, at that time, state-owned television, NTA, the Nigerian Television Authority, had Channel 7, which was sort of dedicated to Yoruba language shows. My grandmother at the time didn't speak a word of English, and she would keep the TV sort of locked to that channel. And it was from that channel that I sort of got a lot of my sort of early exposure to the language and to the way it's used outside the urban areas where I grew up. And I watched a lot of early shows then. Some of them are shows you've probably watched, with characters like Fadeyi Oloro and the rest. And they would do the thing, and they would proclaim things, and they would shout things, and they would sing songs. Sorry about that. They would sing songs, and then there would be things they would say that would sort of go in time with the beating of the drums and so on and so forth. And a lot of my orientation into what sort of the coolest thing about the language would look like came from that. So that's why you would read a book, Ajay, and she would go Edakunduro, and thing stops, right? That's where a lot of those things sort of come from. And I'm really happy that, well, if you do understand the nuances of the language, you sort of you get the feeling. And by the way, she's only one kind of Ajay that you've seen. So you can probably begin to understand how other kinds of Ajay would cast their spells.
Another thing I think was interesting to me that really stood out was the okay, first of all, going back to the idea that pre-colonial Africa, these were normal. Today, these are abnormal. They're outside the norm. So at the time, they were not only normal, but somewhat respected. And not just respected, desired. They were desirable things to be, abilities to have. They had uses. And there's something I noticed in her encounter with the second this dude comes and he wants to take out the other Ajay. And the first thing I'm noticing is, there seems to be a conscious effort to, I think the word is just to equalize, to normalize it, not just normalize it, but there's an equality to what she's doing. I don't know if I'm reading this right, but there seems to be some sort of making her feats and her abilities on a par with the feats and abilities of the Christian faith, or at least the literary version of the Christian faith that we get, where these guys are fighting evil. And then so he now encounters her and tries to stop her. And then the proof of his inability to stop her is that we're the same. That's why you can't stop me. I'm not evil. You're good. I'm good. We're both serving a good purpose here. And that's where his ability stops. He's wondering why he can't overcome her. And she's like, and she herself is a little relieved that he can't overcome her because she's able to stop his weapon because, oh, thank God. With all the things I've done recently, I thought I may have slipped to the dark side, kind of Star Warsian type thing there. So I was just curious about that. Like, that was something that struck me, like, wow, you guys are consciously not just normalizing this, but it's not like there's no, you're not even making it superior. You're making it equal.
It's something that, and you've described it beautifully. I'm not even going to try and add
Oh, thank you.
You've nailed it. But even bringing it to the future, right? It's something I even just want to notice. So the present Ajay, for example, right? If you really look at her, she's literally white. She has red hair. That's because her mom is not Nigerian at all. She's from a foreign country. And that's another thread that you guys will discover why, right? But she's the perfect witch because she's a mixture of two cultures of so-called witches, right? One that is Nigerian and one that's outside Nigerian. But here's the cool thing. So you have the coolest kid in the block, the girl that is white, that has red hair, right? That is almost one of the finest chicks, that speaks very well, comes from a rich home, and she's the one that's actually the witch. Unlike what people would think these days, where you're thinking about the ugliest person or the local person is the witch. You find out that it's the touchiest girl on campus who is the witch, right?
And not lie, I was upset when I noticed she was. I'm like, why are they doing this? Now you're explaining. I'm like, okay.
Putting emphasis on what he says about the power in language. Another thing you notice is that this girl can't speak Yoruba to save her life.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
The only way she can use her power. The only way she can cast the spell is to speak Yoruba.
That is a cool dynamic. I love that.
That the language is strong. You need to understand the language to harness its power. And so it's a way of equalizing. Look, you can be all that. You can be modern. You can be from anywhere in the world, but you need to recognize, and respect the language of other people. Going back to what Wale is saying, that she's just one type of Ajay. There are other Ajays that from other languages that also have power. So each tradition, each heritage has its relevance in today's world and can coexist. You can be half white tush and still be an Ajay. And you can be speaking Queen's English and still cast spells. And you need one to be the other. So
I love that dynamic, like Olawale just said, the fact that her limitation, because that's one of the things you want to see in any superpowered being, right? That what's their limits, what's their flaws, what's the thing that's a challenge for them to overcome, and she has to overcome the inability to speak the language. I was going to ask about that with regards to language too, because, for example, I'm looking at characters like in Trials of Despair. I was reading Trials of Despair and realizing to myself that this kid is doing everything he's doing. At one point, he's also speaking, making declarations and calling out attacks. What I call it, the call of attack thing. But I noticed, I started wondering, what if he couldn't do that? Like, what if you muffled? Like, think of Doctor Strange and how we know, like, and it's established that if he can't move his hands, he can't cast certain spells, he can't do certain things. So, do the characters find themselves? Is that a weakness? Their inability to speak, can it be a weakness? Can they still release their powers without saying something? Is that a plot? is that an issue?
Okay, so there are two ways you can look at it. You can look at it thematically or narratively. Thematically, of course, we've explained all that. We've talked about the relationship between the language and everything that we do. Narratively, it's going to vary from story to story. On some stories, it's directly part of the story. So in Ajay, for instance, the vocalization is part of the spell casting. Yes, if they couldn't speak, they couldn't cast the spell. This is not something we're yet to reveal. Literally, if she doesn't pronounce the Yoruba words properly, the spell does not get cast. With Trials of Despair, that is a plot point that would probably need to be revealed later on, but what I can confirm is that yes, the vocalization is important, but it's slightly different in this case because it has to do with the relationship between the warrior and the warrior's guardian spirit. Yes, exactly. And then in the other books, it sort of varies. So what we do is we find ways to sort of weave the language in, but it's not all the time that it's sort of directly related to what exactly is going on. So for example, Guardian Prime doesn't need to say any Yoruba word before he delivers an uppercut to his opponent's face.
What I like about this weakness, unlike kryptonite, is, I like the fact that um, it's germane to the story. It doesn't sound artificial, and two, it's not permanent. They have the opportunity to get better and better and better, and that's a good addition to their character arc. Getting better at speaking the language. Like everybody who needs to speak a language eventually does.
I just want to make it. This is not even a question. It's more of a comment. And as somebody who, my biggest complaint, and I don't know if Wale remembers this, my biggest complaint about Comic Republic's comics back in the day was how you did the language translations back and forth on the page itself. And I must, and again, as with all things, we always talk about the negative and never then when the positive comes along, we never praise it. I must say that issue's been gone away from me for quite a long time. I've never really had to moan about it again. So wherever you did, wherever you made your changes, I have noticed it and it was well done in terms of the whole subtitle stuff.
I will say that was something I noticed too. Early on, it didn't feel as natural on the page, but the choices made now, the more recent choices in positioning and also the artistic style of its placement have improved it. Like you can literally even see it in certain comics as it jumps from one level to another, and like, oh, that's okay. That felt more organic to the page and felt like it fits in there. So I enjoyed it personally. And I can't lie, it's also improved my Yoruba because I personally don't speak Yoruba that good, just in case you know.
So I'll say that that's testament to the fact that was and still is central to a lot of the things that we're doing. So even when we weren't that good at handling the translations, Jide always had it at the forefront of his of his plans for Comic Republic, that the stories be international, that anybody be able to pick them up and read them. And so even if we didn't have the perfect plan to do the translations, what was important was that we did do them. right? And so, of course, because we had that mandate, we had no choice but to get better than it over time. And you probably noticed we have a few experiments that we ran from time to time on how to do different things, and we're still running experiments as we go along. Jide, you have something you want to say, right?
No, that just thinking back on what Wiley says, I'm just, again, I still feel like I've really had a very, very blessed team that just completely trusts what I say. Because, at certain times, I put my foot down, I say, this is how I want it. And they're like, okay. I'm like, okay, no kickback. And at the end, and at the end, it works. You should literally hear Wale and I go over an issue, right? If you didn't know how close we were as friends, you would think that we were going to not. But here's the thing. We always do that with everything, and then we come to a conclusion, right? And at the end, by the time we come to the conclusion, it's always a right. Whatever you say is what I'm going to do, right? It's never, I've never had to beat it into him. I've always had to explain to him why I have made that decision. And the moment I can make it clear to him why I have made that decision, he has run with it. And fortunately for me, a lot of them have paid off. But, I'm still looking back, and I can't emphasize how the fact that as a team, us being divided and yet united at the same time. When I say divided, meaning each person is an individual with their own ideas, bringing it to the table, and we're still able to mix those ideas together. Have constantly created something that is a work in progress. But the fans have taken it very well, and it's been working. But that's a side note.
Yeah, another thing I would want to add is we have people, it's because when you talk about respecting languages, it's more than just, oh, we have to put the language there and then we go get some translations from Google Translate or whatever. No, you've got to bring the same artistry to the language that you bring to any other language you're writing and that you bring to the art itself, meaning that you need to have not just people who speak the language in just a basic way, but people who understand the sort of the nuance and the beauty and the poetry of the language. So I can't stress enough that there's the influence of someone like Toba on the team. Toba has a very sort of strong literary Yoruba background, and as a result of that, he's able to act in sort of consulting form for a lot of the books that we write, the Yoruba side of things. And then, of course, we have other people who understand other languages to that extent. Like we've got someone who speaks the Edo language with a lot of detail as well. And so that I think is also integral.
Awesome. So we're going to take another break here, but when we come back, we will be talking to these guys about the business side of things. I want to know, Comic Republic is one of the biggest comic book companies that we know of in our part of the world. How much money y'all making? Let's get to that.